What's going on YouTube? It's Teej, back again with another video, and today I'm giving you a run through the NFC North, the last of the 8 divisions in our way too early 2022-2023 regular season predictions. Hopefully you will enjoy today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button, it'll help me out a ton. And if you're new right here, want to see more football content in your life, just hit that big red subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, be sure to give me your NFC North predictions. Give me the run through division 1 through 4, who you think wins the division crown, maybe the sleeper team of the division. I'd love to have your thoughts down below in the comment section. There's no right or wrong answer. We're all going to be wrong in about 9 months' time, so let's have some fun, talk some shop down in the comment section. So this is the last of the 8 divisions we're doing, so there's a fair amount of games already filled in. We'll hit on all those, but because of that, once we get to the last team, which I think is going to be Chicago, the schedule will be made up itself. And I want to also make sure everybody knows, after this one, we will have one more video in this series, and it's just going to be my playoff predictions, way too early style. So if you want to see how I'm thinking the playoffs might unfold and eventual Super Bowl champs, you will see that in the next video in this series. But let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Look, as good a defense as Aaron Rodgers has had since 2010 when they won the Super Bowl, it might be more talented, at least on paper. Aaron Rodgers is a back-to-back time MVP winner. He's a stud. A couple of good running backs. The offensive line is solid as a whole. And, Mike LaFleur has done a great job as the head, or Matt LaFleur, has done a great job as the head coach. 13 wins in each of the first 3 seasons as the head coach. I'm not entirely sure they'll be able to do that again this season. And the big reason why is that wide receiver room, right? Like, especially after seeing, last time we saw the Green Bay on the field, it was with Devontae Adams out there, but the 49ers bracket coverage him, and no one else can come up with an answer. No one else can beat somebody else across from them one-on-one and get open for Aaron Rodgers, and the offense goes stagnant because of it. Now there's no Devontae Adams. So life without maybe the best receiver in football, in my opinion, the best receiver still in football, begins now, and it's going to be a rocky road ahead. It does help, of course, you have Aaron Rodgers, who's still among the best doing it right now and one of the best of all time. So I think it starts with a win week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. I actually do think these two teams will split, so we'll go ahead and fast forward quite a ways, not until week 17. We'll have it be a road and road split. It could be the other way around, but it's a win for one team, win for another. However you like to slice it, feel free. Love to see your record predictions, by the way, so be sure to do that at playoffpredictors.com. But I think Green Bay to start the year out 1-0. And I still think it's one of the best teams in football. So moving on, they're just at a different winning window than the Bears, right? One of the teams that's vying for the number 1 overall pick versus a team that's trying to make their way to the Super Bowl. I'll take Green Bay there. We're going to talk about this Bucs game. I think that'll be a fun one. The Bucs just have a more well-rounded roster, and especially I think early on before, maybe injuries pile up in the receiver room, or maybe some wear and tear against Brady, or, whatever the case may be. If the Bucs are healthy, they're fresh. Week 3, I think that plays to their advantage, and it's one of the best rosters in football. So I'll take Tampa at home. And then it's 4 straight wins against the Pats. I do like the Packers as a roster a little bit more, and plus the advantage in the QB room, and they're at home now. Granted, conditions in Foxborough and Lambeau might share some similarities there. And one of the advantages maybe New England can see this one on the road is one of my big concerns about New England this year is what that secondary is going to look like, specifically at the cornerback position. And one of the biggest weakness on the Green Bay roster is that wide receiver. So maybe, that big of a weakness for Green Bay prevents the Packers from taking advantage of that big of a weakness for New England. So maybe that does play into the Patriots' hands, and Bill Belichick's one of the best coaches alive, or one of the best coaches of all time, if not the best coach of all time. So I can see the Pats doing it, but I got the Packers winning week 4. Giants, not in the same class as Green Bay, and same thing for the Jets. So I got them beating both teams that play there in New Jersey. Those games will both be in Green Bay. But anyways, then the Washington Commanders week 7. And, this could be an interesting one just because any given week that pass rush for the Commanders could win them a game. But Green Bay, assuming David Bakhtiari's out there, Elton Jenkins, assuming all is healthy, I like that offensive line, at least being able to slow it down a little bit. And where I do worry about, what is Sammy Watkins? Is Sammy Watkins really number 1? Is Christian Watson ready to play? Is Romeo Doubs a big part of the offense? Whatever it ends up being, this was a Washington secondary that did tend to give up some big plays. They were about middle of the pack when it comes to 20-plus yard plays given up last year, but I felt like every time I was watching Washington play, there was 20, 30-yard gash here and there that would ultimately come back and really hurt them in the game. So I can see Aaron Rodgers still slicing and dicing against Washington. That would be my prediction right now, but again, like I said, any given week, that pass rush can win the Commanders a game. And on top of that, Carson Wentz, he's a roller coaster. Some weeks he'll be at the top of his game, some weeks at the bottom. So if you get a good pass rush, showing from Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, and so on and so forth, and then a better Carson Wentz week, playing at home, I can certainly see that being one of the more surprising upsets from week 7. Then you get to week 8. I think the Bills might be the best team in football right now, so I'll take them at home. The conditions there in Buffalo are really hard to play in. Aaron Rodgers is one of those buzzsaws that can break through that. Then we get to the Lions, Packers. I do like what the Lions are building. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not entirely sure. I'll give the Lions a win in Week 18, and maybe we'll kind of put that with the caveat. Maybe the Packers are resting starters or something like that. That does mean once we get there, a couple of division losses in a row to end the year. But I think Detroit's starting to get somewhere, right? So I could see this being the year where the Lions can steal one away from Green Bay, especially considering there is as big of a hole at that wide receiver position. I could see the Lions catching Green Bay one time this upcoming season, so I'll go ahead and predict it. Week 10, Dallas is an interesting one because, again, on paper, that offense can go toe-to-toe with just about anybody. So I could see Dak be on a burner. And I can see CeeDee Lamb cooking, left and right and getting open and causing big plays and creating big plays. And Jalen Tolbert maybe has a big week here. I could see this being a back and forth offensive showdown. I think there's enough impact defensive playmakers for the Packers to really prevent what an offense that did take a step back in Dallas it can bring to the table there. So on top of that, I think the Cowboys defense is probably in for a step back, both in the pass rush department. You lose a Randy Gregory. What does that mean you're going to do with Micah Parsons? Are you going to keep him at edge? What does that mean for the middle of the field and that off-ball linebacking group? But also, Trevon Diggs probably just isn't going to come down with 11 interceptions again next year. So I think this Cowboys defense, both on offense and defense, will take a step back. And while I do have my concerns about the Packers wide receiver room, I still think they are a better team in totality. Green Bay playing at home against the Titans. I think that's a nice matchup. And plus, Thursday night football games, I tend to be biased towards the home team, so Green Bay included there. Packers taking down the Eagles, which you saw in my NFC East video. I'm pretty big on the Eagles this year, which, may be a little surprising to many. But that being said, I'll take Green Bay with a win over Philadelphia there. And then last game we'll talk about, a win against the Bears. Again, I just don't think Chicago's ready to compete with Green Bay. And if Aaron Rodgers didn't let you know, he owns that city. So I don't think playing in Chicago will slow him down too much. Bye week. Then a win against the Rams in the bye week, a part of my thinking there. The Rams are certainly a dangerous team, and these two teams certainly could play. This could be a coin toss by the time we get to week 15 and both sides are healthy. So I think this one will be close. I think it'll be a fun one. It's Monday Night Football for a reason. Can't wait to hear the call from Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on this one. Could go either way, but I'll take Green Bay at home. Then another win against the Dolphins. I do like the improvements in the situation that the Miami Dolphins in general have put around Tua Tagovailoa, but they're still not as good as Green Bay in my eyes. Then a couple division losses against the Vikings, the Lions, which is a little abnormal. So, because of that, we'll do one quick change here on the fly. We'll say it's an 0-1 start to the year for Green Bay. Take some time for the receivers to kind of mesh together. However you want to paint that storyline. Makes sense to me. And then a handful of wins to end the year before a loss against the Lions. And maybe that comes to a situation where you're resting someone like an Aaron Rodgers because he doesn't play Week 18. He's used to only playing 16 games in a year, not 17. Whatever the case may be, ultimately, that is a 13-win season in the books for Green Bay. I wasn't entirely sure I'd be able to get there with them, but outside of that wide receiver room, not a whole lot of holes on that roster. Let's go ahead and jump to the Minnesota Vikings. And this is a team I tend to be really biased towards because you look at the offense and Kirk Cousins, given his flaws, still a upper half the league quarterback. He's in that top 16. Justin Jefferson's a stud. Adam Thielen still gets the job done. Hopefully they have Irv Smith Jr. able to play this year. Dalvin Cook, if he's able to play on the field. He's a big play waiting to happen. The offensive line slowly but surely has gotten better. So there's so much on the offensive side that I tend to be biased towards. And if Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter are healthy, man, that pass rush might be able to make up for what is a suspect, questionable cornerback room, right? Like can Cam Dantzler take that step forward? Is Pat Pete okay as a cornerback too if Dantzler does take that step forward? Huge question marks here at the cornerback spot, but that pass rush might be enough to at least hide that weakness a little bit more. So we've already talked about these first two games, talked about Green Bay already. I'm a pretty big supporter with the Eagles, at least with their roster, at least what it looks like on paper, right? And I think that situation around Hurts might be enough to elevate him to a spot where they could be a double-digit win team. Plus, I like Nick Sirianni, Philadelphia at home, Monday Night Football. Let's give the Eagles a win there in week 2. I'll take the Vikings with a win against the Lions, but later on, I'll have the Lions getting revenge in week 14, winning at home. Another home-and-home split here. You can kind of get the sense I'm relatively supportive of what the Lions are building. We'll talk about them next. And then, week 4 against the Saints on the road. This one could definitely be 50-50. Both teams, of course, home stadiums in a dome, so I don't think there's a huge, home field advantage there for New Orleans. I just like the defense and the state that roster is on that side of the football a little bit more in New Orleans. And plus, Dennis Allen, a proven great defensive mind. New coaching staff coming in, so I think that'll also play a factor, maybe some early season turbulence. That said, week 5 win against the Bears. I promise Chicago is not going to go winless this year, and to prove that point, I'm going to have them getting a win later on in the year, splitting with the Vikings. This Vikings team, the other component is too, and this, I can't judge this yet, under the Mike Zimmer and the Rick Spielman tenure, there were just random weeks where the Vikings just fell flat. And there's no guarantee that's going to happen with Kevin O'Connell and that new staff coming in, and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the new GM. There's no guarantee that stays over. But sometimes even with a coaching change, that first year of that new regime, some of those side effects linger a little bit. And, part of it's also because first-time head coach, first-time GM, many first-time coordinators and coaches on that staff. So I think there will be some trials and tribulations along the way for the Minnesota Vikings this year. And then maybe in year 2 of Kevin O'Connell, if they do decide to keep on Kirk Cousins and accumulate more talent next offseason, draft free agency, whatever the case may be, then this team maybe becomes more scary. But I still think you'll see some of those random weird games, like Minnesota losing to the Lions last year was a weird one. Anyways, long tangent aside, I'll give Minnesota the win on the road here against Miami. This is another 50-51. I could see the speed in specific, like who's catching up to Tyreek, who's bringing down Jalen Waddle, because Pat Pete isn't what he used to be. Cam Dantzler is a good athlete, but in coverage, is he sticky enough to keep up with either one of those two star receivers in Miami? That's a huge question mark. And plus, what the Dolphins have done to improve that offensive line might be enough to slow down, even if Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter out on the field. That might be enough to slow them down long enough to get to us some time to find those speedy wide receivers and advantage good wide receiver core against a less than desirable cornerback situation for Minnesota. But that being said, there's something about that offense that is really alluring, and I do understand that cornerback room in Miami is a really good one, and I don't want to take it away from Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. That's one of the best duos in football, and Javon Holland's a freak safety. There's just something about the ability that Justin Jefferson has, and Adam Thielen. They just know how to create those big plays, and I just see this as a game where I could see Minnesota going down, airing it out, in sunny Miami, making it happen. So this is purely a gut feeling, which is not smart to be doing when we're trying to predict a Week 6 matchup. But this early on, I'm allowed to be wrong. So I kind of go with the gut feeling. I like the Vikings situation just a little bit more than the Miami roster. And because of that, I'll take the Vikings on the road. Bye week, then a loss to the Cardinals. Again, another 50-50 game. This will come down to what offense shows up the most, right? If Kyler Murray's playing like an MVP, give it to the Cardinals. If Kirk Cousins is a buzzsaw and making big plays down the field to Justin Jefferson and whatever the case may be, then it'll be Kirk Cousins. But in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and predict that Kyler Murray will be the hotter of those two hands. Vikings bounce back with a win against the Commanders again, especially with the Minnesota offensive line that, it's gotten better, but it's not perfect. Any given week, that Commanders pass rush could win them a game. So I think Minnesota's a better team, but don't be surprised by an upset here for the Commanders. I think the Bills are just a better team, so give Buffalo the win Week 10. Vikings getting some revenge from last year's loss to Cooper Rush on Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. Plus, they're at home, which they were last year, by the way. But that being said, I kind of like the idea of the Vikings getting some revenge Week 11. Thursday Night Football, again, I tend to be biased towards the home team. But this is also just one where it's like, all right, is Malcolm Butler slowing down Justin Jefferson? Because if that's his task, yeah, I'm going to play Justin Jefferson in daily fantasy that week because that is not going to be fair. Or even if it's Jalen Mills. Justin Jefferson's going to go crazy this week, and that's just too big of a mismatch from player talent to team weakness for me to ignore. So I'll take Minnesota there on Thursday Night Football. And same thing with the Jets. They have improved that secondary, but there's one team trying to prove themselves as an up-and-coming potential playoff team with New York. And there's another team that's certainly vying for a playoff spot with Minnesota. So a little bit of a different timetable and where I think these two rosters are and who's more apt to win right now. More, has more veterans on it versus younger players trying to develop and learn the ways of a winning team. And because of that, I'll give the edge to the Vikings. Then we've already talked about this Lions game. I think Detroit will get one of those two. Colts and Minnesota, this another coin toss games, 50-50, both doomed teams. Quarterbacks are probably, close to each other depending on what QB ranking you're looking at, but they're both in that, mid-tier you could maybe win a Super Bowl with if everything else breaks right, but they're imperfect. So because of that, there's not a huge advantage one way or another, and maybe you'll say, Eric Kendricks is getting old, but he's still a great run defender, but that's about it, unless, we'll see what that interior defensive line that bring in Harrison Phillips, they being Minnesota. We'll see what that nose tackle situation looks like, but this could be a game where the Colts just run all over Minnesota, and that's kind of where I'm leaning here. The Vikings did have a little bit of an issue stopping the run last year, which is disappointing given you're bringing in Dalvin Tomlinson and now you have a Harrison Phillips. You'd like to think they could be able to stop it a little better, but there's so many different factors, and injuries could play a big concern at this time of the year. Like if Eric Kendricks isn't out there in Week 15, yeah, Jonathan Taylor's probably going crazy. But that being said, I'm speculating, and I'm not accounting for injuries this early on. That's impossible to do. But I'll just take the Colts. We've given a handful of these 50-50 games to Minnesota. It feels like you need one to break against them. And then the Vikings are just a better team than the Giants right now. And then the loss to the Packers, which we've already talked about. And then the Bears, maybe by Week 18, things start to gel and young players start to take steps forward for the Bears, and I can see them pulling off an upset win against Minnesota. Plus, this is a team that just has those weird games. So 9-8, unfortunately, feels about right. I think the talent on this team is probably 10-7, maybe even at 11-6. But first-time head coach, and some of those woes that come with, a new coaching staff, transition between an old regime and a new one, create some bumps in the road. Maybe 9-8 is, maybe that's about what I'd say Minnesota is regardless. Let's get on to the Detroit Lions. I love this team's offseason the past couple years, specifically the way they draft. Even moving up and getting to Jameson Williams, I'd rather keep more assets as more of a quantity game, more so than quality to a degree, of course, but even then moving up to get Jameson Williams at 12 made a ton of sense for the roster. The price, depending on what chart you look at, wasn't all that steep. So I just love them being aggressive. And, for years now, they have stockpiled assets. Time to go use them. And if that means moving up from 32 to 12 to go get a potential wide receiver 1, and in my eyes, the best wide receiver in that last draft class, by all means, go do it. So they're already 6-9, so we'll talk about a few of these games. Again, I'm a big fan of what the Eagles have as a roster, so Philadelphia comes away with a win week 1. Commanders, Lions, maybe that's 50-50. Maybe that should be a Washington win, but I think first home game of the year, I think Dan Campbell and crew will be able to put on the fire, or actually the second home game. So maybe week 1, maybe the Lions are a sneaky upset team there, just trying to put on a show for that home crowd, but 1-1 start all the same. And then Minnesota, we've already talked about. Seattle's an imperfect team, of course, and these are both teams that are, probably bottom 8 in the league still. Maybe the Lions starting to peak out of that, bottom 4th of the NFL, but them and Seattle are pretty close. I'll give the edge to Detroit being at home. Patriots, don't have a whole lot of wide receiver talent that stands out or cornerback talent, but it's still coached by the greatest head coach of all time. And, Mac Jones in year 2, you can assume he'll take a step forward. I already think Mac Jones is a quarterback I'd rather be starting than Jared Goff anyway, so I'll give the QB edge and the advantage to New England there. Bye week, then a loss to the Cowboys. Even with my thoughts on Dallas taking a couple steps back on both sides of the ball, they're a better team than Detroit right now. But these are two teams, especially, we'll see where these next few offseasons takes Dallas. With their financial situations, they might find themselves having to lay on more sacrificial swords. And as Detroit maybe continues their upward swing, these two teams might intersect and pass one another. Dolphins with a win week 8. Especially, I'd love to see Jeff Okudah get to where I thought he would be coming out of Ohio State. He was like this perfect cornerback prospect, didn't have penalty issues, has the size, has the arm length, unbelievable tape, played in a Power 5 conference, played at one of the best programs in the country, and a program that has had decorated cornerbacks go on and become, Pro Bowl and All-Pro level players. But it just hasn't come together. Hopefully he's bouncing back from that, Achilles tear. Amani Oruwari has a nice story, 6 interceptions last year, but still maybe not a top-tier corner yet. But this could be a game where I could see Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle going crazy against an imperfect secondary in Detroit. And then the Packers, just in a different winning window right now than the Lions. And the last couple of games we have to do right here, I'm going to have Detroit go ahead and we'll call it a road and road split. Lions win week 10 and then Chicago with revenge week 17. These two teams are both bottom of the barrel-ish. I think Chicago has a worse roster all in all, but I think they're kind of embracing that, and I think they should because it'll set them up with high draft pick next year and a ton of money. Right now looks like they'll have on the books for next free agency, but we'll talk about Chicago in a moment. But I do think Detroit is a slightly better team right now, and given the situation around their quarterbacks, I'd almost rather be I would definitely rather be Jared Goff and have those receivers and that offensive line in front of me versus what Justin Fields is dealing with. You almost just wish you could switch the quarterbacks and give Justin Fields that situation and just let Jared Goff go into the abyss with the tough group and ecosystem around Justin Fields that's in Chicago. So you almost wish you could switch those two, but yeah, I like the Lions a little bit more, but I will call it a split because Chicago's not going to go 0-17. This is one of those weird games where I like the Lions more than the Giants, but the Giants playing at home, and that defense still has some talent on it. The wide receiver room is okay, and honestly, I think I'm a little low on the Giants win total than what I might have predicted if you were to just ask me off the cuff, or maybe 2 weeks ago even thinking about it. But that being said, the Giants, again, are not going to be a team that goes 0-17, so I'll give them the win there against the Lions. Bills, better team. Jags, Lions, that's kind of an upset one, but again, the Jags are going to win games, and they're going to do it. The Lions are as close of an even opponent as they have on their schedule, so it kind of makes some sense there. That game is in Detroit, so that one can definitely flip the other way around. And then we talked about the split against Minnesota. I do like the Lions more than the Jets. So maybe where you say, the Lions are not going to lose at home to the Jags. Maybe you're the same person who's saying the Jets are not going to lose at home to the Lions. So 50-50 games. You win about 50% of them. You lose about 50% of them. That's why they're called 50-50 games. Carolina, I like Detroit a lot more than Carolina. Now, granted, I did make that NFC South predictions video before the Baker Mayfield trade came down. And assuming he's the starter, I do think that team is significantly improved versus where they would be with Sam Darnold or trying to shoehorn Matt Corral onto the field way too early, in my opinion. So maybe that one swings back the other way. I love Saturday football too, so every time I get the chance to say that, I have to say it. But maybe with Baker Mayfield, I'd flip this one, but for right now, I'll keep it with the Lions getting the win there week 17 or week 16. Week 17 we already talked about. Give the Bears a win there, and we'll talk about them here in just one more moment. And then the Lions with a win week 18 against Green Bay. All in all, 7-10. I think it's a huge step in the right direction, and that 5-7 win range feels about right for Detroit, showing improvement, and it sets up one more offseason where you can be more active in free agency, go out there and nab some veterans, add some experience to your roster, one more sound draft, and you might be, especially with that draft, if it includes a quarterback or if they find a way to get a veteran one, whoever may be available next offseason, this team is certainly on the rise. Last team to talk about, the record is already completely done. Chicago Bears 3-14. Now look, Chicago fans, you're going to look at this and be like, how dare you? I would embrace this, right? First year with Matt Eberflus, it's going to take some time for him to, learn the mantle of being a head coach. You have a first-time offensive coordinator in Luke Getsy. There's a lot of new pieces on that roster and around their situation. Let this be the year where you can, like Detroit, just take a loss. It'll be a rough year, lots of losing, but it's an opportunity for them to kind of learn the reins, but also for young talent. I mean, you might have an Amon-Ra St. Brown emerge on this team. Maybe it is Velus Jones. I wasn't crazy about that third-round pick, but maybe he takes a huge step forward in the second half of the year, and you find out, hey, him and Darnell Mooney, they're fine. We just got to find that alpha, but we have 2/3 of the wide receiver position filled out. Embrace that this year. Find what young guys can stick in this turnaround, because next offseason, you're going to have a ton of money to spend free agency. You have to spend it wisely, but you'll have a ton of money to spend, and you'll start to, as you get further and further away from the Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace tenure with their respective positions, head coach and GM, you'll start to have those assets come back after all the trades they had made, and you didn't have a first-round pick this past year because of the move to get Justin Fields. So next offseason, it'll look a little bit more normal when it comes to your cap space, and you'll actually have a little bit more because you traded players like a Khalil Mack, and you might move on from a Robert Quinn. So if anything, you'll have more assets than normal. So embrace a rough season. Try to find those gems in the rough, and let that new coaching staff gain some experience and set up year 2 for them, year 3 for Justin Fields to be the year where maybe things take a significant leap forward. But let's go ahead and run down the schedule, and you're going to hear me say this a lot. This roster just isn't comparable to a San Francisco, to a Green Bay. I have them winning against Houston because that feels a little more even. Giants, that game could be 50-50, but again, the Giants are going to win games. Those two teams feel pretty close. I'll give this one the edge to the home team with the Giants. Vikings are a better roster. Washington, I have plenty of concerns with that team and the Carson Wentz situation under center. But they're better, right? I trust the wide receiver room in Washington more. I like the offensive line more. I like the pass rush more. I like the secondary more. I mean, there's just not much about the Chicago team that I look at right now that I like more than any other team in the league, right? Even their secondary, as I'm saying this. Washington, I said it earlier, gave up a lot of big chunk plays last year, but Kendall Fuller's a really good player in the slot. Year 2 of Benjamin St. Juste. Another year with William Jackson. Hopefully he can settle back down to where he was towards the end of his tenure in Cincinnati. There's pieces there. Even a Cameron Curl. Nice third-year young safety. Does a lot in the box. You compare that to, Chicago, and I may like, the idea of, pairing up a Kyler Gordon and a, Jalen Johnson. 2 young corners that I think can stick and would fit in Matt Eberflus's defense. But one's a guy who was injured his rookie year, going into year 3, and one's a rookie cornerback. There's uncertainty there. And I may like the idea of Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson pairing up, but there's uncertainty there because I haven't seen it yet. So, again, embrace a rough year ahead, and maybe Jaquan Brisker does showcase, hey, him and Eddie Jackson's a legit duo. You have that position figured out. And maybe you will see this year Kyler Gordon prove, hey, in a cover 2 defense, I'm all you need. I may be a little small, but I can fit in this defense. Him and Jalen Johnson, they're the answer. They're on the outside. We're going to find out, and I would embrace taking that time to figure out who's going to be a part of that long-term rebuild. So, long tangent aside, the Patriots are a better team. The Cowboys, the Dolphins, more apt rosters to compete right now than where I see Chicago at right now. We've already talked about this Lions game. Falcons at the 50-51, the Jets at the 50-51, so maybe I'm being a little mean to Chicago, giving them a loss in both those games. Maybe it's a 1-1 split there in week 11 and 12. Green Bay, talked about it. Even with the bye week, I really like, again, what the Eagles have on paper, that roster, the situation, the coaching staff. Give me Philadelphia on the road in Week 15. The Bills, one of the best rosters in football. And we've already talked about back-to-back wins to end the year, Week 17, 18. And I could see that being the storyline. Rough, beginning of the year, only one win, and then they win the last 2 games. End the year on a positive note. You start to see more from those young players, and you start to see it all kind of come together as you go into a big offseason. Again, a lot of money to spend, more assets to use in the draft. And it could set up to where if Justin Fields just shows just enough, keeps his head over water just a little bit, continues to get oxygen, survives to year 3, then I think with one more offseason, you could really put together a good ecosystem around him. And maybe the narrative is, I don't think it'll be quite as bad as Tua. Let's just say this year Fields is passable. But because of the situation, I could see this becoming one more offseason. Chicago tries to do what Miami did and buckle down, put any and every resource possible around Justin Fields, and really get a look at what he could be with, a functioning society around him. But that is going to do it for my NFC North record predictions. Next video will be my way too early predictions for the playoffs. Hope to have you with me for that video. But hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It'll help me out a ton. If you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. Of course, most importantly, join me for a conversation down below in the comments section. Do you think the Packers can get to 13 wins? Where do you think the Lions stand? How do you think this division plays out 1 through 4? Anything you have to share, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.